So welcome everybody. This is the ongoing Thursday night sort of lecture and discussion about the Refuge Recovery program, the core teachings of the program, where I share some of what's in the book and then make some commentary, and then we have an opportunity for some participation, some Q&A. We are coming to the end of the Eightfold Path. We're on the final chapter of the Eightfold Path, the eighth factor, that of concentration, and the importance and the dangers of concentration practice. Maybe some of you have been coming the whole time and you've gotten all the first 11 or 12. I think this is probably our 12th session. But as a little bit of a reminder and a review, Refuge Recovery consists of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. The first truth is that we all experience suffering, and as addicts, as recovering addicts, there's a special extra layer of suffering that we experience, that we've created, that our addictions have created, and that we've experienced. The first truth of Refuge Recovery asks us to do an in-depth inventory. If you haven't done that yet, please do. It's in the book, it's on the website, refugerecovery.org, has a worksheet, I believe, that you can download in order to answer the question. So first truth, that addiction creates suffering in our lives, is suffering. The second truth, that there is a cause, second noble truth, the cause of suffering is repetitive craving. And again, every living being experiences this craving for pleasure, this craving to avoid pain. And we as addicts have maybe a more extreme tendency to try to avoid pain and create pleasure to the point of many consequences in our lives, extra layers of suffering through our attempts to avoid or sustain pleasure and pain. The second truth inventory also has an detailed inventory that we do as part of our recovery, where we investigate all of the underlying conditions and experiences in our lives that perhaps influenced our experience of becoming an addict, crossing that line from normal drug and alcohol abuse into addictive drug, alcohol, sex, food, process addictions, whatever it was that manifested as our addictions. The third truth is that it is possible to recover. This is the Buddha's teaching that all living beings have the power and ability to awaken, to be free from suffering, to practice non-attachment and compassion, and wake up and see the causes of suffering and bring the antidotes to the causes of suffering, find freedom in this lifetime. This is the promise of the Dharma. The fourth truth is the path to recovery, to awakening, to healing that we are applying in Refuge Recovery, and that is the Eightfold Path. So I'm going to read the chapter on the eighth factor, which we're at tonight. But before, I'll back up to chapter 4 and read this first section. This starts on page 23. The path to recovery. Welcome to the rest of your life. You are entering a way of life that may be familiar to some, but will be foreign to others. The Refuge Recovery program is a systematic approach to training our minds to see clearly and respond wisely to life. This is a path that will need to be walked, one foot in front of the other, one breath at a time. In the beginning, some of it may seem confusing or counterintuitive, and some of it is. But you will find that with time, familiarity, and experience, it will all make perfect sense and will gradually become a more and more natural way of being. The fourth noble truth sets out the way, the Eightfold Path. This leads to the end of suffering and is composed of 8 factors. The Eightfold Path can be further simplified into 3 sections. The first section is wisdom, which means wise understanding of reality and wise intentions with our life's energy. The second section is ethics, which includes communication, community, actions, renunciation, and livelihood, service. The third section is meditation. This consists of effort, mindfulness, and tonight's topic, concentration. Each factor of this path is a practice. You will be taking on these 8 areas of practice. This is often taught with the analogy of an 8-spoked wheel. You could think of these 8 areas of practice as the spokes on your wheel of recovery. Addiction causes a deep imbalance in the wheel of life. The suffering we experience could be seen as the wobbles and thuds of a wheel with missing spokes, or at least those not properly connected or out of balance. A full recovery will take place when all 8 spokes are strong and balanced or true. This will take some time, but it begins as we commit to renunciation, take refuge, and begin the practice of meditation. Again, it is important to understand that these factors are not a linear progression of 1 through 8. For most, it will actually be the 6th, 7th, and 8th factors of effort, mindfulness, and concentration that will be the key to coming into an authentic wisdom and integration of the other factors. As we apply our energy and effort to concentrating the mind and being mindful, we begin to see more and more clearly. Mindfulness will lead us to direct understanding. Understanding will lead us to wise intentions and actions. Mindfulness will also help lead us to appropriate communication and livelihood. Eventually, through wise actions and meditations of mindfulness, kindness, compassion, concentration, and forgiveness, we will come to directly know that our wheel of life is coming into more balance. With balance will come freedom from craving the substances or behaviors of our addiction. The Eightfold Path leads to safety, to a refuge from addiction. So I'm going to pause there and then jump back to the chapter 11, concentration, which starts on page 85. So let me talk a little bit of shit about concentration before I jump into what we say here. There are 2 forms of meditation. There's a lot of different forms of meditation, of course, but from a Buddhist perspective, for the most part, we would categorize pretty much every single meditation as either a concentration-based practice or a mindfulness-based practice. I spoke about this last time in our last session when we went over the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but I want to revisit it. Mindfulness is open and inclusive and portable and something that we can and should do in every activity of our life. It is inclusive. We have a formal mindfulness meditation practice that we develop in sitting and walking, standing and laying down. But then we bring mindfulness to eating. We bring mindfulness to all of our activities, whatever we're doing. Going to the bathroom, showering, driving. Mindfulness is appropriate. And mindfulness includes all of our thoughts, all of our emotions, all of our sensations. The whole human experience can be met with mindfulness, which is present time, non-judgmental awareness. Concentration has an object, and technically concentration has a single object. We focus our attention on one thing, therefore ignoring everything else. It's a very important skill to be able to concentrate our attention. But this is something that the Buddha over and over warned people about getting attached to. That if we do too much concentration, or if our meditation is always concentration based, what we're developing is a skill of ignoring rather than turning towards, rather than feeling, rather than really having intelligence about our own minds and our own emotions. And we can be developing a avoidance technique. Now, as addicts, we need to learn to avoid some things, right? And especially in early recovery, you want to be able to ignore your mind when it's telling you to drink or use or eat or masturbate or spend or cling on one level or another, whatever the addiction is. Like sometimes being able to ignore is a very important skill. But if we spend our whole life, our whole meditation practice, our whole always ignoring what your mind is saying or what emotion is arising, then we don't actually get to the root of the healing, of the awakening, of the freedom that we're seeking. The recovery will makes, from a Buddhist perspective, mindfulness necessary. The Buddha had practiced deep concentration, and that's what traditionally is taught in Indian Hindu teachings. Mantra practices, yogic practices, almost all of it is concentration based. There was no inclusive mindfulness, and this is what the Buddha rejected. He said, I know how to concentrate. Concentration leads to bliss, leads to relaxation, leads to all of these avoidance of what's causing you suffering. But what concentration doesn't do is develop compassion, develop non-attachment, let us see the nature of our minds clearly and have a transformative relationship to it. Mostly it allows us to avoid and then, experience some of the phenomena, pleasant phenomena sometimes, of avoidance. Even our first meditation instruction, which is pay attention to your breath and ignore your mind, is actually a concentration practice. And I know for myself and probably most of you, it's where we get the first relief, learning to concentrate on the breath and ignore the judging, craving, addict mind. So there's something very useful about concentration. But we can't stop there. And I know most of you, if you didn't catch last night's, it's on the YouTube channel. You can go back and listen to our last session. The importance of mindfulness we can't talk about enough. And this is really what sets a Buddhist approach to recovery, a Buddhist approach to life, apart from just about any other approach. And anything that has a sort of mindfulness-based approach is borrowed from Buddhism. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, created mindfulness, discovered mindfulness. There's no precedent for any other source of mindfulness-based teachings other than the Buddha. Of course, in our culture, Buddhism has been secularized. Mindfulness has been borrowed by medicine and science, and in my opinion, in really wonderful ways, applied to modern secular life. But it is Buddhist. It's a Buddhist teaching. Comes from Buddhism, from the Buddha. I probably am going to repeat, some of what I was just saying in this chapter. So let's see what the chapter says, and then let's have some discussion about it. We develop the capacity to focus the mind on a single object, such as the breath or a phrase. Training the mind through the practices of loving kindness, compassion, and forgiveness to focus on the positive qualities we seek to uncover. And we utilize concentration at times of temptation or craving in order to abstain from acting unwisely. Concentration or focused attention is another necessary tool on the path to recovery and freedom. When the mind is fully concentrated on one object, for example, on a mantra, a phrase, or a specific aspect of the breath or body, you will often have a very pleasant, blissed out experience. This is because when your mind is fully concentrated, you are no longer aware of the hindrances of sleepiness, restlessness, craving, doubt, and aversion. This can be a very useful experience in early recovery when the cravings are still very strong. Concentration is developed by giving preference to a single object, such as the breath, a phrase, a mantra, or any of the previous foundations of mindfulness. As we continually bring our attention back to the chosen object, the mind becomes more focused and able to see more clearly the nature of the chosen experience. Our practice of mindfulness of breath is a concentration practice. Also, when we practice forgiveness, loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and appreciation meditations, we repeat phrases over and over in our minds, and this too concentrates the mind. These practices are also creating new thought patterns or new neural pathways. We honor and utilize concentration practices as an aspect of our path to recovery, but we also must issue a warning of caution. When the concentration wears off, the mind is still subject to those same difficult experiences. Thus, the so-called spiritual experience of concentration meditations is really just the temporary phenomena of bliss or nothingness. A temporary state of concentration can't change your relationship to the mind. It can't set you free from the confusion and difficulty in life. It only allows you to avoid it or ignore it temporarily. Although the Buddha ultimately rejected concentration as the sole path to freedom, he realized that concentration was a useful tool when integrated with mindfulness to bring about insight and wisdom. Concentration is best used to see the impermanent, impersonal, and unsatisfactory nature of all phenomena. These three insights, impermanence, impersonality, and unsatisfactoriness, are the keys to our recovery. Those who accept the world for how it is, rather than constantly wishing for something else, are on the path to freedom from addiction. In times of craving and temptation, many have found it useful to replace the thoughts of acting out with a mantra-like recitation of one of the heart practices, saying over and over, "May I be at ease," or "May I be free from suffering." This is a skillful way to redirect our attention and distract us from the craving that has arisen. The level of concentration needed to fully benefit from the mindfulness, insight, meditation practices is thought to be in the area of being able to sustain focus on the chosen object, the breath or phrase, for about 10 minutes without getting lost in thought. Most people will be able to attain this level of concentration within a few months if they practice daily and diligently. Concentration is one of our precious and useful tools on the path to recovery. If used wisely, it will profoundly help our process of awakening. If misused or abused, it could postpone our liberation indefinitely. Be wary of teachers and traditions that are only offering concentration-based practices. Mindfulness is the true cause of liberating insights. concentration supports mindfulness. So you can reflect on your own meditation practice and how much of the time are you choosing to bring your attention back and focus just on one aspect of the mindfulness practice, or always coming back to a phrase. As most of you are aware, we encourage people in Refuge Recovery to alternate mindfulness and concentration practices so that you're bringing both. We say from the beginning, do mindfulness and forgiveness. And forgiveness is an emotional intelligence developing, concentration-based practice where we learn to forgive ourselves, we learn to ask for forgiveness and offer forgiveness to the people that we resent, that have harmed us in some way. So with all of these practices, ultimately we have to be responsible to ourselves for finding the balance between how much concentration to develop and how much to bring that open, accepting, non-judgmental, inclusive awareness so that we can truly see impermanence, the impersonal nature of the human mind, on all of the judgments and fears and cravings and aversions and ego trips that the human mind does. It's not your fault. And ultimately, the more we wake up to that, the more we see the unsatisfactory nature, the impersonal, and we stop taking it all so personal. We stop suffering so much, really, which is truly the goal of our recovery, is not just how do we maintain abstinence. So of course, that's the foundation, but how do we really get free? How do we live a life where are able to integrate the joys and sorrows, the pleasures and pains, without just ignoring them and concentrating them away, but developing compassion by turning towards, learning to feel, learning to be uncomfortable, learning to enjoy the pleasure even when it's impermanent, arising and passing. Some of my thoughts about where we're at in this series and concentration, and I'd like to open to some dialogue. Any questions, comments, clarifications? If you would like to engage with me, I'm happy to engage with you and to talk. And you can do so by raising your hand in the window. There's some dots, and it'll, or in the chat box, it'll allow you to raise your hand and participate in that way. And I'll call on you and we can dialogue a bit. Or if you would like to send a message in the chat box, you can do that. So you can use your voice or you can send a message, up to you. Is what I'm saying about concentration make sense to you? Is it clear? And or do you have any questions about this for your own recovery? Kobe, go for it. You're unmuted. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, thank you, Noah. So I've heard you, kind of refer to the difference between concentration and mindfulness in this way a couple of times, and it really stresses me out because right now there's a whole lot of noise going on in there, and so for me to just be able to sit quietly and just sit still kind of is a task enough for me. So it doesn't really stress me out that much, but, I wonder about, like, am I sort of not doing what I need to be doing if at this point I'm just working on sitting and listening to my breath, and sort of so what you read in the book about, like, I should be able to sit for about 10 minutes without getting lost in thought. So is that kind of, I can have that as my goal before I start worrying about the difference between mindfulness and concentration?
Yes, it's a good goal. I have mixed feelings about putting it in there, because some people feel like they never get to the place where they can get 10 minutes without being and again, that this doesn't mean that thoughts don't arise. I think that this is one of the confusion that people bring, is that they think I should be able to sit here with no thoughts. And you have to get very concentrated for no thoughts, but you don't have to get very concentrated to be able to mostly stay with the breath and the body, and thoughts are kind of in the background. And even if you do engage with it a little bit, you really quickly are able to disengage, and you're not lost in some fantasy or memory or plan for a long time. And you just see their thoughts arising and passing. My sense is you're a little bit new, right? And what you're saying is that, yes, don't stress about it. And that for now, actually, your practice will probably be mostly concentration based, and that's totally okay. I think that for my probably almost 2 years of my meditation practice, I mostly concentrated on my breath and did some of the loving kindness in those phrases. But it took a while before I felt settled enough or really understood well enough about the second foundation and third foundation, and actually watching the mind. So in the beginning, breath and forgiveness phrases are perfect. And so don't worry too much. The more you do that, the more you'll build the stability, and then you'll start to investigate more. The reason I'm critical and push this is that all of the time I meet and you hear about people who are 5 years in, 10 years in, 20 years in, and they're still just watching the breath and ignoring their mind. And it's just a losing strategy in the long run. If you really want to be free, you have to stop ignoring your mind and start just being with the chaos of the thinking mind with compassion, and learn to see that it's not that personal. In the beginning, breath, forgiveness, loving kindness, compassion. Perfect.
Thank you.
Welcome. Robin?
Hey, Noah, it's great to be here. Hi, everybody. I'm Robin. This is the first time I've been here. I just found out about this. So I've been working with Refuge Recovery for a little bit, and then I kind of left it for a little bit, and now I'm working back with it. But I didn't know y'all were here, so I'm grateful to find you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I really like that chapter, and I never really put that much thought into it, the difference between the concentration and the mindfulness. And now that you mention it, it is a lot of concentration practice for me. And I get lost a lot in thought. And I catch it every now and then. I realize, oh, thinking, reel it in, thinking, reel it in. And I think I get glimpses of mindfulness, and it was kind of stressing me out too, as a last person. It kind of stresses me out too, trying to think about how much do I actually spend in mindfulness, such as mindfulness of walking, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of washing the dishes, taking a shower, what have you. And I feel like I get glimpses of it, and the goal is to understand, just because I'm understanding it more as a feeling tone of watching the mind and a feeling tone of what's going on. So it's more of a feeling tone, I think, for me. And I'm just trying to, and I know it's not really a good idea to try to wrap your mind around mindfulness, it's just probably wig you out a little bit. I think you answered a lot of my question, but I'm guessing just being able to be the watcher of the mind, which I understand that, and I do struggle with that. I do struggle with watching the mind and just letting it do its thing without having to pull it back and concentrate on something else.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like you answered my question with just those practices to start with and stick with for right now, and then start to pay attention, see if I can go down that road.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the important part is, and this is where the kind of the warning is, that concentration feels better.
Yeah.
And so we
Easy.
want to, we tend to want to bring our attention back to the chosen object.
Right.
And really opening to mindfulness, where you feel a little bit more destabilized and less avoidance of what's causing us suffering, and actually turning towards that judging thought or that insecurity or that pain in your knee when you're meditating.
Yeah.
It's so important to do that. And again, this is one of the reasons why the Buddha said this path is against the stream, is counter to our instincts, because our instincts are avoid.
Yeah.
And then we can start to use even our meditation practice to avoid.
Yeah.
In the
I see that.
beginning, avoidance is skillful. In the long run, not so skillful.
I get that now. Thank you. I didn't understand that, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Glad to find you. Kimberly sent me.
William?
Hello, it's nice to meet you all. And I'm pretty new to Refuge Recovery, just within the last 30 days. And I'm really enjoying it. And I was excited to hear about this opportunity. I missed out on a lot of what has already occurred, but there's always time to catch up. This has really been an eye-opener for me. I mean, I've meditated on and off for a long time, mostly off, sometimes on. And it was always about a breathing meditation. And I knew that there were some other forms of meditation where there was a phrase to dwell on and such. I didn't think of those, I thought of those as different from breathing meditation, but actually, as you just have described, it's another form of concentration meditation. And I'd never identified it that way. So it's really enlightening to hear that distinction being made. And, and I get it that concentration meditation is in fact avoidance in a sense, because everything else is shut out if you're properly concentrating. And I always thought it was about concentrating on the breath and reaching that point of perfect stillness and a lake that's totally clear and clean and no ripples on it. And I try to get my mind there, not really realizing that was only one half of what it is that you really want to be doing, and knowing that the reason that we become addicted is due to underlying circumstances that as the book early on says, you're never, if you just abstain and you don't deal with the underlying conditions, you're not really recovering. And that mindfulness doorway seems like it's the place to go to start to interact with the other components that are leading you to where you've been. So it's a really eye-opening distinction and something new in my brain today. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, William, and welcome to Refuge. Glad you're joining us. And yeah, my sense is that you're getting it. And just to make a little comment about, I think it's so common that it's like the most common thing that people come to meditation with is this idea of creating stillness. And it doesn't seem to be what the Buddha was actually teaching. It's non-reactivity is really the goal, not stillness. And having an ability to have a non-reactive relationship to the chaos of the human heart and mind in the midst of difficulties, to not cling, to not hate, to not judge, is much more practical for our life, for our recovery, than thinking I need to be still, quiet, pond. My teacher's teacher, Ajahn Chah, has this saying that's very common where he says, maybe our practice can be as simple as letting go. He said, if you let go a little bit, you'll have a little bit of happiness. If you let go a lot, you'll have a lot of happiness. If you let go absolutely, you'll know the happiness of the Buddha, the freedom of the Buddha. So, but he said, and your mind will become quiet and still like a forest pool. But then he uses this image, and this is the important image. He says, and all kinds of strange and wonderful animals will come to drink from that still pool. So I feel like what he's saying here is like, yes, if you get really concentrated and you let go of clinging and aversion, you'll have an inner kind of calmness, stillness. But strange and wonderful animals are your thoughts and your emotions and sensations that will continue to come, but that there's an inner ease and non-reactivity. We're not trying to cling to the thoughts or the sensations or the emotions. And that this is really the liberation that's possible. It's not an absence of thought. It's a ease and stillness in the midst of thought. So I hope that's helpful. That's the way I understand it. Thank you, William. Julie, please.
Hi, Noah. Thanks. Good to be here. Nice to see everybody.
Welcome.
And so here's my thing. When I'm practicing concentration, which I've gotten really comfortable with concentration, breath, just focus on the breath. But when I start to bring in things like forgiveness specifically, I get, and certain experiences, certain people, it's like my mind is like, oh no, let's go look at this for a little while. And I still get really caught up and seduced in those thoughts. And so that's my thing.
And it's everybody's thing. That's common. That happens to all of us. And that's part of the process. When you give your mind a task that it does not want to do, like forgive, where it feels vulnerable, it feels threatened, it feels, of course, the mind is like, no, fuck this. Let's think about some other shit, or let's get into like why they don't deserve forgiveness, or why I don't deserve forgiveness, or it's so easy to get lost in that. And this is where you just return to the phrase. And the mind, and you say, I forgive you. And then the mind goes, no, don't forgive. Or you think about something else. And then you come back and you say, I forgive you. And then the mind does its dance and you come back and you say, I forgive you. And you just keep, and that's the concentration of you keep returning to that thought, no matter what the mind does, whether the mind says, yes, finally, she's forgiving. Or the mind says, no fucking way, that's not safe. You just keep doing the practice. And that's why it's a concentration, is because you're returning to the phrase over and over. There's a bit of a hybrid that's happening too in a lot of the meditations, and I think in a lot of the ways that I teach, where there's, if you say the phrase and then you bring mindfulness to what happens, then you're doing a bit of mindfulness and you're like placing this thought in your mind, and then you're breathing with it, and you're feeling the second foundation as is pleasant or unpleasant, and what is my mind doing, third foundation. So there's a hybrid that's happening where we are doing the phrases of concentration, but we're also bringing a mindful investigation to the effects of that. So yes, it's hard. I mean, right? Part of your question or your comment is just like, this is hard. My mind's not good at just staying on point with the emotional intelligence or the forgiveness or the compassion or the, it's not good at it. Nobody's mind is. You know this, and it's in the book about the Buddha saying, the untrained mind is like a monkey. And this monkey that's swinging to the future and swinging to the past and attacking sometimes. Sometimes it's angry monkey, sometimes it's playful monkey, sometimes it's horny monkey, whatever it is. It's, it's just, that's just what the mind is like. And so we keep bringing that back here. And then we investigate, open, here, open, here, open. And let's see, I know you're some years in. I'd imagine that it's getting a bit better than it used to be. Sometimes we feel like, I know in my own practice, I've felt like there's setbacks of like, I think I used to be better at meditating than I am now. Sometimes we have those like pink cloud experiences in meditation in the beginning where you have those big experiences and then trying to get back to them. They're more craving for that blissful meditation I had in 97. But we just keep practicing. I mean, often it's just about perseverance and seeing how's it changing over the months and years of our practice. Good to see you.
Thank you.
James McDougall.
Hello, Noah. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much for putting this song on tonight. And just a question of mine. I had 16 years of sobriety before March of this year. And included in that sobriety, I did have a meditation practice. But when I did decide to pick up again, and alcohol was my choice of aversion, it went on for long enough that I had to go away. I figured it was the best thing for me to go into a rehab center. And on the first day of my rehab, at the rehab center, they handed me Refuge Recovery, as a matter of fact, which was the best gift they could have given me, because I had a nice long month to study the book and underline and highlight. Just what I'm alluding to pretty much is the word powerlessness. While I was at the center, I took part in quite a few yoga nidra classes, and there was a mantra that was in one of the yoga nidra classes that said, "In my powerless, I accept who I am and my life as it is," and it really resonated with me. And now, as I'm studying the Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and I'm wondering just where maybe does powerlessness fit within wisdom and ethics and concentration? And would the word powerlessness, would that go back as far as the Buddha and his teachings?
Well, I have some thoughts, but I also have some questions for you. First a comment, then a question, then I'll answer your question. My comment is, if it works, keep doing it, whether it fits with Buddhism or not. You know what I mean by that? Like if you're doing
Yes.
something and you feel like you're benefiting from it, trust that. Whether it fits with, what Refuge is saying or what Buddhism is saying. Like, so trust your direct experience. That's my comment. My question is, what does powerlessness mean to you?
Mostly to me, powerlessness is when I actually imbibe, when I'm actually in the act of aversion, imbibing, and the opposite of renunciation. I'm fully invested in what I'm doing and avoiding suffering.
Does it, okay. Does it mean that human beings do not have free will? That we are powerless to make decisions?
No.
It just means that, so to you, it means that once you have taken a drink, you lose the ability to stop, to choose.
I know the choice is there, and for the most part, I'll choose not to stop.
Mhm. Um, I mean, the reason I want to do some of this kind of exploration, clarifying is, you know, my own direct experience, and also being a member of 12-step and ongoing. I did not stop going. Most of you are probably aware. Even though I created Refuge Recovery, I continue to participate in the 12-step programs for many reasons, partially just out of habit, but I also like it. So your question about is it fit with Buddhism? On some levels, it doesn't really, and I can't think of anywhere in early Buddhist teachings. Well, here, how about this? I'm thinking about this on the fly. The first noble truth is that we all experience suffering, and that on some level or another, like, because we don't, it's not that we don't have the ability to end suffering, right? That's the third noble truth. But first, the Buddha starts with this acknowledgement that we all experience suffering on some levels, because the natural, untrained tendency of the human heart and mind is to cling and to crave and to obey the mind. Without meditation, and that's why I asked that question about free will, because I feel like on some level what the Buddha is saying is that without meditation, we don't have a lot of free will, right? Because we wouldn't actually choose to suffer the way that we do, or to become alcoholics, or like, we wouldn't choose that. Nobody is going to sign up for that. Right? But we all have experienced that because we didn't have the skills, we didn't have the training to not obey our mind when it says drink, when it says use, when it says lie, steal, cheat, whatever bad advice the mind is giving us. With mindfulness, with when we start meditating, then we have that pause, that ability. If we sustain a mindfulness, a practice, and this is again, on this topic where mindfulness is so important, so that you know what's happening in your mind, and you're not really just really good at ignoring your mind. So when that thought comes up that says you should relapse, which happens for all of us at some point or another, when we have enough mindfulness, then we're able to say, oh, wow, that's a really scary thought and a really bad advice that my mind is giving me. And with the insights that mindfulness lead to, we have that free will to say, I'm not going to obey that. I'm not going to, we're not powerless over that thought. Now, I would say on some level, here's what where I can land with. We're a bit powerless over what arises. Does that make sense? We're a bit powerless over what thoughts come into your mind or what emotions we experience. We're a bit, we can't control our mind and our heart. Like, your mind's going to do what it's going to do. Your emotion, it's going to do. We're not in control of that. With a trained heart and mind, we develop the ability to choose how we respond to what arises. And in that way, then this is really the Buddha's teaching, where human beings have the ability to train their minds to the point, their heart to the point, our practice renunciation, to where we no longer choose destructive behaviors like drinking and using. We can't stop the mind from having those thoughts. We can stop obeying them in the long run.
Yes.
And I want to come back to my first comment, which is like, if that, if powerlessness, that nidra practice that you're doing feels good and about acceptance and about accepting ourselves just the way we are, that's beautiful. Go with that.
Mm.
There's, I think, a lot of people in Refuge and using the Buddhist approach that have a big aversion to powerlessness, that, it's because at its worst, it's the perspective that says human beings are puppets and only God can control everything in your life.
Yes.
And, you can't stay sober. Only God can keep you sober, the kind of worst
Mhm.
interpretation of that. So a lot of us are like, well, that sounds like bullshit. So
Mm.
powerlessness must not be true. But powerlessness in the form of acceptance. One more thought. There's this piece of what I'm mostly talking about, which is our own relationship to our own mind and heart. And then there's our relationship to each other and to the world. So there's the equanimity meditation practice, which also we do as a concentration, repeating over and over. All beings have their own karma. Their happiness or unhappiness depends on their own actions, not my wishes for them. It sounds a little bit like I am powerless over others. I can't control others. Right? So in that way, if there's a place of powerlessness, I can't make anybody happy. I can't make anybody be compassionate or forgiving or stop being a racist idiot. I can't make people do that. But I can look at my own racism. I can look at my own biases. I can look at my own mind and heart. And I have a lot of influence over myself. And of course, we have some influence over each other. And it's one of the importances of the taking refuge in the Sangha, of how we relate to each other. We have some influence. We can support, we can encourage, and sometimes we can confront each other, but we can't control each other. So internal and external thought, and I probably have a lot more thoughts, but those are my initial thoughts about some of the ways to reflect on powerlessness from what we're doing.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. I hope it's helpful, and welcome back. And as we say, it's just today. I'm glad you're back, and I know this is a little bit of a different topic, but I was very conscious about not doing a big thing about time in Refuge, so that there wasn't the relapse shaming, and that we all are sober today, in recovery today, rather than all of the stuff. I mean, Refuge has now been around for 6 years, and people are celebrating time, but if you look in the book, there's no mention of celebrating time.
No.
Or introducing yourself as a new person, or any of that, or even identifying as an addict, because relapse is often part of people's story and experience, and I always just wanted this to be a place where they didn't feel like that extra level of relapse shame. So,
for that, I'm grateful. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to welcome you back, and glad you're with us.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure meeting you.
You too. I think we're out of time. Next week, coming previews. Everybody's favorite chapter of Refuge Recovery, chapter 13, lucky 13, the path to heartfulness. As we walk the path to Refuge Recovery, we gradually uncover a loving heart. So tune in next week, join me for the discussion of uncovering this loving heart that's always been here. We just haven't had that much access to. Part of the concentration, part of the mindfulness, all of the renunciation and practice that we do to open our hearts to become more loving, more kind, more compassionate. And Refuge Recovery is self-supporting. I do this out of my own generosity. Any donations that come in go to support the organization, Refuge Recovery World Services. I don't receive any money for anything that I do in Refuge at this time. So please be generous if you can. We have an organization to support. Please give some donations. The link is in the chat. We'll leave it up for a few minutes, or go to refugerecovery.org, make a donation if you feel moved to, if you care to. Please support us in that way. And I think that's it. Glad to see everybody. Welcome to the new folks and the old folks. And next week, Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time, hope to see you here. Thanks.